Hello again, gamers. Welcome back to the Board Game Captain. I'm the Captain, and today I'm going to be reviewing and talking about Death in Space. I feel like you have to say this with an epic voice whenever you say Death in Space. I mean, it really lends itself to that, doesn't it? I want to give a big thank you to the publishers. So this was had a lot of different companies working on it. CHWP, Cosmic Gaze, Free League Workshop, and Stockholm Cartel. I want to thank them for this review copy of Death in Space to be able to read and play games with and film some content with, like I'm doing right here. So Death in Space was designed by, and apologies if I mispronounce the names, feel free to comment down below and correct me, but I believe it is Christian Plagfors and Carl Neblaeus. I'm going to show their names right there. In addition, I'm going to show up on the screen here everybody who worked on this book, because there are quite a few people. So to start with, we're going to work our way through this book. I'm going to tell you what's in here so you have a good idea of the content. And then I'm going to talk about my thoughts on the system, the universe, the game in general, and this book in general before I rate it. So, all right, to start with, when you open up the cover, the first thing you're going to notice is something that I really love about games that I have seen before from Stockholm Cartel. Specifically Mork Borg, which I had reviewed before, where they do a lot of cheat sheets of tables you're going to commonly use on the inside cover, both front and back. Of course, I'm going to be showing a lot of this up on the screen, but so the front cover has these tables with the red headings. The back cover has the cheat sheet, which I love that they actually called it that, for a lot of quick referencing of rules that you may want to be able to find quickly. Now, these two do not have everything I would like to find quickly, but they do have a lot of things. And, you know, the few other things that they don't have, you could just make Xeroxes of, so it's not that big a deal. All right, so once we get past, you know, the opening section here where we have all of the people involved in the creation, and we have a little quote from George Gordon Byron. It says, "The rivers, lakes, and ocean all stood still, and nothing stirred within their silent depths," which really helps set the mood. I actually really like the inclusion of this quote here. Because it helps set the mood for this dark, disturbing sci-fi horror universe that this game is going to give you. So to start you right off, the first bit of content we have is on the storyline of the universe. So the thing is, the universe is collapsing. The expansion made it to a point where the expansion stalled and then began falling back in upon itself. Now, if you know anything, if you know anything about astrophysics, you know there is a theory out there about the fact that the expansion would eventually slow and stop, and then there would be a big crunch where everything would come back in upon itself. And basically the idea is that theory is true, and that we are in the part of the timeline where now we are headed towards the big crunch. The other big part of the storyline that's very important is the gem war. You see, there was a fictional important resource called these gems that were discovered in the Tenebris system. Now, the gems are integral to a form of faster than light travel that was discovered. Without them, we cannot go from solar system to solar system in any real efficient sort of way. So there was a war fought over control of the gems by the different mega corporations of the universe, because these could even allow you to, believe it or not, to even travel to other galaxies. That's how amazingly fast this faster than light travel was. But the war really ended with no real winners. There was a quote unquote winner, but in reality, what wound up happening is it thrust the entirety of the universe into a dark age where technology is scarce, the gems are scarce, faster than light travel ships are scarce, everything is slowly falling backwards on a technological level because most of the high technology that was available before the war is no longer able to be produced. So all that's left is what is literally out there. And most ships are held together by duct tape and chewing gum. All this is happening while also some strange dark force is out there attempting to speed up the destruction of the universe. Now, this dark force they reference is known as the Void, and the Void seems to influence these incredibly dangerous monsters out there in the universe, and also seems to corrupt and mutate people who spend a lot of time traveling out in space. Which, of course, is the player characters. And this does come into the rules, which is really, really cool. So now next we have a bit on some information on, the general state of the universe, the fact that everything is decaying, the fact that reputation can be as important as money, the fact that the governments really are no more. There are no more really big central powers. Everything's kind of like the Wild West. You can kind of do what you want. And then it starts talking about a big part of the setting, which is in the Tenebris system, the main center of society there, which is where they kind of, by default, are going to start you, which is in the system where the crystals were and are, to a limited extent, still mined. There is this big ring around a world, a ring made of derelict spacecrafts and space stations, where you can start your campaign out, and it kind of by default has you start there. Next, we have the Getting Started section, which goes over character creation. So character creation has a lot of tables for random generation of things, but you can choose most of them. One of the few things that you really can't choose is for your stats. The difference in stats is minor, and you can fix low stats through advancement fairly easily. Adjusting your stats is very easily done through playing a few games of this. I'll explain that a little bit later when we get to the advancement part of the book. But this is as good a place as any to start discussing a little bit of the system. I'm going to discuss it as we get into different parts of the book that show the different parts of the system. But here we have the four basic abilities, is how they call them. But your four basic statistics, which are body, dexterity, savvy, and tech. So body says bodily strength and physical resilience. It also includes melee attacks. Dexterity says reflexes, poise, and speed. Savvy is perception, intuition, psychological resistance, and piloting spacecraft. Tech is an understanding and operating of technology as well as ranged attacks. Now, each of these are used for anything that falls under their category, and the way the rules work, though that's not fully explained here, it's explained later, but I'm going to discuss it here real quick, is that for your character creation purposes, you roll a d4, and then you roll a second d4 and subtract it from the first. So it can be a negative number. And that is your starting stat in each of these. You do it once for each stat. And then when rolling an ability that requires that stat, you roll a 20-sided die, and you add or subtract your stat from your roll, and you're trying to get a 12 or better. And that is the general normal thing to do. And then just to basically finish discussing how this works, you could have situations that give you advantage or disadvantage. If you have an advantage, you roll 2d20, and either one can be used. So as long as you succeed on a single one, you succeed. And if you have disadvantage, you roll 2d20, and you must succeed on both. And that's the general way the basic rule system in this works. It's actually fairly rules light, so you can focus on the story and things like that. But there is more rules when it comes to mutations and void corruption. But we're going to get to that in a minute. So moving on, the second part of character creation after the abilities is origin, where you basically choose essentially what is a character class that gives you a basic idea of what your character is like, and then a choice of two special abilities from said character class that you can take one of. And they're very interesting and different. You have the origins are carbon, chrome, punk, solpod, velocity cursed, or void. I like the velocity cursed one. They have this weird thing where you have this uncontrollable amount of forced time travel that's being done to you, where you have future memories as a possibility, which is really odd. Then you go into character details. Now here we have a bunch of tables again. You can pick or roll your choice for your background, for some traits. These are less game effect than they are just storyline, because when it's background, it's things like you were a legionnaire, you were a freight tracer, you were a deep fried welder. For traits, are things like you're polite, you're an optimist, you're lazy, you're rough, things like that. Drive is the thing that drives you. And again, you have a table you could roll, or you could choose. Moving on, we have character details, and again, this is kind of what you look like clothes-wise. So whether you want to look like someone who is wearing perfectly weathered clothes, or layers of black fabric wrapped loosely, or having robotic arms and hands. This is a general appearance thing that people will see when they meet you. I like the robotic arms and hands because you could be Clive from Clive and Burton if you're familiar with those old graphic novels. Then there is past allegiance, which before you became a member of this rogue salvage or rogue smuggler operating ship, you might have had an allegiance to, say, one of the sides of the war, or you might have had an allegiance to an ideal or your family or something like that, and you can discuss that. And this is something about your background history. Then we have the hit points and defense rating, which are based on your basic stats. So you start with 1d8 maximum hit points, and when you rest, you recover 1d8 plus your body stat in hit points. Your defense rating is a measure of how well you can avoid damage. Your unarmored defense rating is 12, modified by your dexterity. So if you have a high dexterity, you actually get to boost up your defense rating, whereas if you have a low dexterity, it'll be lower. And that's how hard it is for someone to hit you when they're directly trying to hit you. Opposed rolls, by the way, are also a thing in this, where instead of a target number of 12, you're both trying to roll higher than the other. A tiebreaker being the person who is actively doing the causing the opposed roll. Now, next we have starting gear and starting bonus in regard to bonus of money, etc. So there's a bunch of various gear you could start with, and then we move on to another chapter, starting chapter 2, which starts with hub creation. So as a group, your players are going to create a hub. The hub is their home base. It is where they live, and that could be a ship or that could be a space station. Now, this is very dependent on what sort of story you and your players are going to want to play through. If you want to be like the crew of the Firefly, pick a space ship. If you want to be like the crew of Deep Space Nine, pick a space station. And it's really what it comes down to. But of course, you'll be far less well equipped and more rough and ready than the crew of Deep Space Nine. But you get what I'm saying. It's a difference in the kind of story you're wanting to tell. Are you going to want to go out adventuring and exploring yourself, or are you going to want trouble to come to you and randomly show up at your station, is really what it comes down to. The next chapter is general rules, where I've already gone over a lot of the basics of how ability checks work, how advantage and disadvantage work. For item slots, you are able to carry item slots worth 12 plus your body. That's how many items you're able to carry. Normal sized items are 1 item slot. There are large items that will take up multiple item slots if they're big and heavy, like spare parts you need to transport for repairing your ship, etc. Whereas tiny items may count as nothing, or you may need a bunch of them to even fill up a single item slot. It's a very easy and quick way to keep track of how much you can carry. Next, we have void points. Now, this is a part of the rules I haven't gone over yet, and this is very interesting. So I want to first reference mutations before I get into void points, because one of the main ways to activate mutations is using void points. So here's the thing. Now, during character creation, one of the options allowed you to take a mutation. If you did not take it during character creation, you could take it during character advancement for 15 experience points. There are also other random events that could give you a mutation. Now, void points happen. You gain a void point every time you fail a die roll. And you can hold or bank up to 4 void points, though you generally don't want to bank them. You want to use them, and I'll explain why. So the first thing you can do with void points, and this is a good thing to do with them if you have a bunch of void points, is you can use them to activate a mutation. Mutations give you all sorts of really cool special abilities. They can be all sorts of things, from literally opening a warp hole that a monster will come through that might attack your enemies as well as you, to having magnetic blisters on your hands and being able to walk up bulkheads like Spider-Man. All sorts of weird, bizarre, crazy things that can happen from mutations. They usually take a void point to activate. But in addition, the other thing you can do with void points is to give you an advantage on any roll. The downside to this is if you still fail that roll, what's going to happen is you have to test to see if you get void corruption. Now, for void corruption, you roll a d6, and if you roll equal to or less than your remaining number of void points, which is why you don't want to stock them. You get Void Corruption. And Void Corruption has this amazing table with all sorts of weird things that are generally more negative than positive. They go from simple, light, annoyance or weird result to quite possibly deadly and dangerous results. They have all sorts of weird things from, part of your body always being cloaked in darkness to an eyeball growing in part of your body where it shouldn't be, like in your hand, or to something like you have a vestigial twin grow out of you and separate from you and then maybe want to kill you and take your place. There are all sorts of weird things that can happen from Void Corruption. They're generally not good, but can be very interesting. Both the tables for Cosmic Mutations and for Void Corruption are amazingly interesting. And this was probably my favorite part of this entire book. I love these tables. They reminded me a lot of some of the weird mutation tables they had in Morkborg, but even better. I like the results on these even better than the ones in Morkborg. Next, we deal with condition and how to use spare parts to repair your station or ship if it gets damaged and how damage works on that. Then we have specifically how the repairs work. How to move around in space using extravehicular suits, and the way the different suits work for moving around in zero gravity, full-on space travel, which includes a really handy table here. I like this one a lot. That gives you kind of the time travel to move based on whether you have a slow vehicle, a fast vehicle, or a vehicle capable of bridging. Now, bridging, again, is the faster than light travel that uses the crystals. You are not going to start with a vehicle that can do that. Generally speaking, these vehicles are rare, but you may hire passage attached to one of them with your small ship. Now, for instance, traveling from planet to planet in the system with a slow vehicle will take months to get from planet to planet. With a fast vehicle will take weeks. With a bridging vehicle will be instant. Between systems, from one star system to another, will take decades with a slow vehicle. Will take years with a fast vehicle. Will be within weeks for a bridging vehicle. And to another galaxy, that's right, another galaxy will take millennia or more with a slow vehicle. Will take millennia with a fast vehicle, and will be months with a bridging vehicle. So it is actually feasible to move to another galaxy if you hire a ride on a bridging vehicle. Now, next we move into a full explanation of combat, which includes all of the way that initiative and attack rolls work. Now, initiative is really interesting in this. So the one who initiates the conflict, the one who actually decides that combat is starting, gets to start the first round of combat. If it's unclear who was going to be the starting person, then you can determine randomly. But to represent the fact that your team works as a team, whoever's turn it was gets to decide who gets the next initiative. So if you're trying to get the jump on everybody, you can just say, okay, I just went, now Jen, you go. And then Jen could be like, okay, I'm done. Now Melissa, you go. And then Melissa can go, I'm done. Now Dave, you go. And before you know it, you've all gone before the enemies have even got a chance. And that helps you to get the drop on somebody if you want to initiate combat. Attack rolls are done to try, you have to equal someone's defense rating rather than equal 12. There are risky attacks that can deal more damage to an opponent, but they also expose you to counterattacks. So the risky attack is kind of whatever the game master decides is a risky attack, what qualifies as something that would be a risky attack. If they succeed, they deal an extra damage die of the appropriate damage die type. But if they fail, the target opponent gets to take an immediate attack back and then decides who goes next. So they'll interrupt the initiative order. So these can be rather risky. They can have big payoff, but they can also have a big failure. Critical hits are when you roll a natural 20, in which case you also get an extra damage die. So if you roll a natural 20 on a risky attack, you're going to get 2 extra damage dice, which are really, really awesome. Condition on weapons can be reduced, by the way. So it helps to represent the fact that these weapons are kind of like the weapons in Fallout, where they're put together out of spare parts. Nobody's really manufacturing them anymore. And just through the wear and tear, they're wearing out because they're old and they're made from spare parts from a few different weapons. You roll a 6-sided die at the end of every combat you use a weapon, and on a 1, it loses a point of condition and needs to have some maintenance done on it to bring it back up so you don't fully break the weapon, which does feel very Fallout to me. Yeah, this is a really, really interesting. There's also a system for morale where you can cause enemies to break and run. There's full explanation of how death and healing works in here. There's a weird table where if you die, you have a vision of how you were really meant to die, and you can tell the other players before your character dies. This is a fairly lethal system. There's a decent chance to die. It's not the most lethal system I've ever seen, but it's on the more lethal side of the spectrum. This is one of those games where I would recommend you start with a backup character, because in case your character dies, you want to be able to be like, okay, here's my backup character, and have the game master be able to work you in to get you right back in the same session. There's a full explanation on how to do confrontation and combat with spacecraft, though it does fully explain to you that actual firefights in space are rare because of how everyone doesn't want to take damage to their ships. Boarding actions are far more common. Someone will come up on you, attach their ship to yours, and they'll board you, and then you have to fight them off. That is a far more common thing than actual firefights in space, which really only happen in the most dire of circumstances. Next, we have the advancement system. So for the advancement, this is a fairly easy thing. You talk to your group and you ask them all of these questions, and you figure out with them as the game master, have they qualified each for a yes to these questions, and for each yes, they get an experience point at the end of the game. So it's, did you repair something? Did you deliver on a dangerous contract? Did you use at least one void point? Did you discover a new and potentially dangerous place? Did you gain a new enemy? Did you find someone new that you can trust? Did you contribute with something especially memorable? Every one of these gives you a yes. So there is a possibility of 7 experience. I think on average, you're probably going to get 5 to 7. It's hard to get all 7, mind you, but it only costs 5 to up a stat up to a possible +1. Beyond that, increasing it is 3 times the value you're raising it to. So raising it to a +2 is 6, for instance. Then it costs you 5 to increase your maximum hit points by 1d4. This is a useful one because you could possibly start out with very few hit points. And again, this can be a very lethal system. And for 15, there are 2 things that cost 15. One is to gain a mutation, which mutations are some of the most flavorful and interesting things to do. As long as your character doesn't still have really low hit points and has your stats where you want them, mutation should probably be one of the next things you go for. But also there is you can gain the other of the 2 optional benefits for your character class, if you recall. It says gain an additional original benefit, can have at most 2, because remember, each of those classes had 2 possible benefits. You can gain the other one if the other one was really appealing to you and you wanted to do that. When gaining a mutation, you do have to, by the way, lower one of your stats by 1. But again, it's only 5 to raise it back up, as long as, you know, it's a +1 or less that you are raising it to. So if you have +1, you lower it to a 0, and then you use 5 experience next game, basically just to raise it back up to a +1 is fine. So the next chapter is extras, and this is a very big chapter. This has tons of stuff. So first, we have principles, which gives you a lot of the principles of the universe and principles for role-playing and things you should do as a game master. Then we have a full explanation of the Tenebris system, going over every major planet, every major moon, all the different places in the Tenebris system, especially having a huge focus on the ring, where, of course, they are intending for you to start your campaign. There's also a big exploration of 4 major cults that are active in the Tenebris system right now, being that this is end times, that everybody is aware that the universe is on a slow decline to annihilation. Things like, you know, doomsday cults are popping up all over the place. There's a full explanation of lots of interesting areas on the ring, which also gives you a big adventure hook involving a gang war between 2 gangs that are vying for control over this one little area of the ring that they suggest you started. This is a really good little adventure hook without actually giving any solutions to any of the issues. It just gives you all of the things that are, you know, there, and obviously the solutions do present themselves, but it really leaves it open because it doesn't want to shoehorn you in. This leaves it as a adventure that very much you can allow your players to get very creative with and figure out what it is they're going to do to solve it. And also, it's a great introduction to the ring. It's a great introduction to the universe in general. And then, it's a great launching point to move on to other adventures, because by the end of it, you will be fully fueled up and ready to go with your home base, whether that be a ship or a space station, that then you can move your space station away from the ring and put it somewhere else in the solar system. But yeah, really fun. I don't want to ruin anything from that particular game for you, but I do enjoy it. The next is the tables and tools section. Now, first thing we have in here is a bunch of monsters. These are great. The creatures of the abyss, as they are called. All sorts of strange mutant monsters, either just random or possibly creatures controlled by the Void. The Void being, of course, that evil presence that is trying to corrupt people and bring about the end of the universe. Next, we have people who have been corrupted by the Void, which includes some things that through Void corruption you can turn into. There were references to this in the Void corruption table, that some of the things there could turn you into an NPC, into a monster, which would be akin to dying, because then once you turn into one of those, you kind of have to make a new character. Then we've got a big section on tables for making random traps and also random encounters. There's a lot of big various tables in here, lots of encounters, iron ring locations, tons of tables to help you figure stuff out like this. This chapter is absolutely loaded with tables. A big table on addictive substances, because this system is meant to be very dark and gritty, and these addictive substances both can have useful effects, in some cases like keeping you awake, but also can be addictive and you have to roll to check on addiction. They also have their cost to buy them from a drug dealer, etc. FYI, if you hadn't guessed already, this is a very adult game, so you have to be on board with the adult grittiness of this universe if you're going to be playing this game. Of course, you can always tone that down in your own system if you want to. Me personally, I wouldn't, though. This is part of the fun of this game for me. Then we have a listing of a bunch of different spacecraft, how to make a spacecraft for your home system, for both you or NPCs, including, the nitty-gritty of the different modules in the spacecraft, the power systems, etc. And they have modules that are both available for you and not available for you, ones that would only be available for NPCs. We have lots of weapons in here. This is a great way to, great resource for just all sorts of goodies. Now, for the weapons, they generally are statted, because obviously this is a fairly rules light system, as a general type of weapon, like a melee combat weapon, a pistol or revolver, a shotgun. But then they have the names of a bunch of different weapons that fit the bill for that. So when you're telling your player character, you can be like, you have a weapon that is a prospector's handgun, or a luminance marksman barreled rifle, or something along those lines. You can give it a specific name, which is really cool. There's costs for contractors, because you can actually hire people to do repair work or to be mercenaries or guards for you. And there's also a contract generator for people to hire you, as well as a generator for creating NPCs here. Whew, there's actually a lot for what is ostensibly a fairly small book. This book looks small. It is kind of small. It's only totally about 128 pages, not including the cheat sheets in the back and front covers. But there's a lot packed in here. This is really, really freaking cool. So first off, the first thing I want to talk about really briefly is the format of this. This is a nice hardcover. It's got an old school thread binding, which seems really durable. I like this holographic shiny cover on the front and back, which is really awesome. The inside being black pages with white or colored text and white or colored pictures that are stark against the black background is gorgeous. Love the way this book looks. This is up there as one of the best produced books, in my opinion, for the feeling it's trying to get across, for the universe it is attempting to convey. This is one of the best produced books I've ever gone through for a review. I absolutely love it. Next, I want to talk about the universe, because in a fairly rules light system, I do feel it is very important to have a really good and immersive universe. I love this universe. It is awesome. It is gritty. It is dirty. I can feel grit and oil in my fingers while I'm reading about life on the ring. It's amazing. I love the mutations. I love the Void Curse. I love how lethal it is. I love how almost nihilistic it is in its presentation. Not fully, but everyone has this little bit of nihilism in the back. Like, we're going to do what we can, but we all know we're ending towards the end of the universe. It feels like a post-apocalypse combined with a sci-fi space setting, and that is amazing. This is not a light-hearted space opera romp or a space western. This is a dark, gritty, cyberpunk, dystopian post-apocalypse mixed with a dark, gritty space. Think like Alien and Blade Runner and Mad Max all rolled into one, which is really freaking cool. Absolutely love the setting. Now, the rules. The rules are very rules light for the most part. The only thing that makes them a little more complex and interesting is when you get into the rules around mutations and being void cursed. But the rules themselves, 4 stats. That's it. You just got 4 stats for everything. Now, this is going to be make it or break it for a lot of people. I personally think this is great. This very much, I do really like a lot of rules light systems, and this is one of the ones that I do think does it right. I think they did a really good job of breaking everything down into 4 stats, and I like the whole very easy, you roll a d20, you get a 12 or better for everything. If you have advantage, you roll 2d20. If you have disadvantage, you roll 2d20. But on advantage, you only need 1 to succeed. On disadvantage, you need both to succeed. Very easy. Everybody always knows what they need to roll. There's a few extra things for tables where they might need to roll a d6, etc., or other dice for damage, etc. But everything else is done with 1 or 2 20-sided dice. And I really like that. I think this is really, really great. Now, again, if you are someone who really likes super in-depth rules, this may not be the game for you. Keep that in mind. But if you do appreciate a rules light system that just helps you get right into it and not have to stop to look up rules, and you can just go and focus more on actual role play, actual story and character development, then this definitely is going to be the game system for you. So also, I do want to quickly address on some things that are not in this book but are free and available to you. I was over on the Death in Space website. If you Google Death in Space, it'll pop up. And they have linked from some posts they have there. They have a random character generator that you can, with just the push of a single button, create a character sheet with a randomly generated character on it that you could use for pre-gens, for a convention game, or for quick-made NPCs that are fully statted out if you wanted to. Also, they have over there, which is really cool, links to where you can listen to soundscapes they have created for every one of the major places you can go in the Tenebris system. There is a whole bunch over on YouTube here. They have the whole list up there. You can look up Death in Space Soundscape, and it'll be there. And they're all available there, and they're amazing. They're really good. I was listening to a bunch of them, and they give you the eerie sort of feeling. Each one is custom tailored to the description of that particular planet or location. They have one for the Ring, for instance. They have this one that's for like a desert, a desolate place that sounds like wind whipping and dust being whipped around, and all sorts of interesting stuff. I really, really like that. There's a lot of great resources for this game. Okay, now, I know those things are not included in the game itself. Everything that's included in the game itself is awesome, but they are free available to you on the internet, and I felt like I had to reference them just because, for me, they accentuate how awesome this game-playing experience is going to be when you actually get a group together and play it. And this is when I really want to get a group together. I really want to run a game of this. My mind has been running wild with wanting to run a game of this since I read it, which I was able to, by the way, shoot through this, reading it in 2 days in my spare time. Not very long, very easy to run, very easy to jump into once you've gone through it. So, as you can tell, I enjoyed this book. I am going to be giving Death in Space 9.5 stars out of 10. I love this. This is phenomenal. Absolutely near perfect role-playing game. If you are looking to branch out and get more interesting role-playing games to do some campaigns with, because again, this is one that I think would make a cool campaign, even though you're probably going to have multiple characters die during said campaign. It's okay, you'll make another one. You'll have backup characters to replace them. This is a really cool one to do an actual campaign with. Probably a short-run campaign. I think this would be best served to do like the equivalent of a mini series. You do a single campaign with a short run and definite end. I think it's a little too nihilistic to do just like a open-ended keep going game. That might get a little too repetitive, but unless you do it as a series of self-contained ones where after the first you have the first successful and satisfying ending, you give a hook to another big story arc, which that could work and that could be really cool. But overall, I really like this. I think Death in Space is great. I think there's plenty here to work with, and also they give you a lot of room for your own creativity. While they fully explore the Tenebris system, no other systems are explored because they are all up to you, the game master, to create. So after going through the Tenebris system, you're supposed to create others if your players are playing on a ship and would like to go out and visit other systems. You can create them in their entirety. It's all up to you. Now, on the other hand, if they are doing a space station, they're probably going to be a space station in the Tenebris system, and you can come up with all sorts of interesting people and aliens that will come visit their station for whatever it is their station focuses on. There, maybe their station is a floating diner in the asteroid belt that people come visit, like asteroid miners while they're off duty or something. Yeah, this is great. Absolutely recommend Death in Space to you. Go ahead and comment down below if you've played Death in Space, if you picked this up and read it, and what you thought of it. If you enjoyed this review of a role-playing game, be sure to give it a like, share it on all forms of social media, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Board Game Captain. That's Captain spelled with a K on YouTube. And until next time, game on.